Today, it's quiet here. This unassuming patch of ground in South Vietnam is peaceful now. Standing here, you don't think much of it. But in early 1969, that same ground was anything but quiet. It's difficult to imagine, but 42 U.S. Marines were killed here in some of the most brutal close combat of the Vietnam War. South of the demilitarized zone, in the mountains of Quang Tri Province, Marines were operating across a wide, rugged area, moving between jungle, hills, and narrow valleys, trying to keep pressure on enemy forces that had pulled back but had not disappeared. No clear front lines, just one operation after another. Daily patrols and search and destroy missions were exhausting. Movement through terrain that favored the enemy more than it ever did the men moving through it. At that time, enemy activity was described as light and sporadic. Small probes and occasional mortar or rocket fire were more of a nuisance than anything else. North Vietnamese units had pulled back into jungle areas to regroup, resupply, and wait. Under the command of Major General Ray Davis, the 3rd Marine Division had shifted the way it operated. Instead of holding fixed positions and waiting for contact, units were pushed out into the field, moving constantly, using helicopters to stay mobile, striking into areas where the enemy was believed to be operating rather than sitting and absorbing attacks. That meant small fire support bases were established across the region. Soldiers and Marines would clear small patches of ground, often on hilltops just large enough to support artillery and provide coverage for the units moving below. They weren't meant to be permanent, just enough to hold, support, and move again if they needed to. Places like Fire Support Base Neville, and 10 kilometers to the east, Fire Base Russell. Neville sat on Hill 1103. It was a small, exposed position roughly the size of a football field, cut out of rough terrain, bordered on one side by a steep drop, and often covered in low clouds that reduced visibility to almost nothing. To some Marines seeing it for the first time, it didn't look like much at all. Just a bare patch of ground on top of a hill, something that didn't seem like it could hold much. Russell was similar. It too was isolated, carved out of the terrain, supporting artillery and relying on its perimeter defenses and the Marines defending it. Both bases were protected with concertina wire, listening posts, claymore mines, and ground sensors. And despite all that, they were regularly probed by enemy sappers. Movement near the wire just outside the perimeter. Too close for comfort. One Marine described it simply: they come up to the wire almost every night, and then they don't do anything. By late February, that kind of activity had become expected, and on the night of February 25, 1969, it started the same way. A fog was moving in and visibility dropped. It was quiet and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But that was about to change. One trip flare went off, and everything erupted. North Vietnamese sappers, hundreds of them, moved through the wire and into the base, attacking from inside the perimeter, hitting bunkers, throwing satchel charges, moving fast and close, forcing the fight into confined spaces where distance closed to arm's length. At nearly the same time, Fire Support Base Russell was also attacked. Heavy mortars came in, accurate, and then the perimeter was breached, and the fighting moved inside the base. At Neville, the sappers came through fast, moving across the western side of the perimeter, cutting through wire and pushing straight into the positions where Marines were already in their bunkers. Satchel charges came in first, thrown into bunker openings with explosions hitting so close they forced men down before they could even react. At Russell, it was the same kind of fight, but it started with a heavy mortar barrage that hit the base before the sappers moved in. rounds landing across the perimeter, hitting command posts and mortar positions, disrupting everything before the ground attack even began. Then, the wire was breached, and they poured through, knocking out several key positions. Marines were being killed or wounded before they could even get fully into the fight. Most positions were hit almost immediately. Some Marines were forced out of their positions, and others stayed where they were and fought from inside what was left of them. There was chaos and confusion. It was all happening too fast. After that, many Marines were engaged in hand-to-hand combat. Marines moved between positions, returning fire where they could, trying to hold what was left of the line while the attack moved through them. Weapons were being fired at point-blank range, personal, up-close killing. Back at Neville, Marines began to rally as the initial shock wore off. Mortars were brought back into action, where they could be, firing illumination and counterfire into the attacking force, even as positions around them were still being hit. Men moved through the base under fire, resupplying ammunition, pulling wounded back, re-establishing positions that had been hit just minutes earlier. Men pulled others out of damaged positions, moved them to cover, then went back into the fight. Over and over again, Marines displayed unbelievable courage. By the time the attacks were finally repelled, both bases had taken devastating losses. Both bases were mostly destroyed, and the dead and wounded from both sides were littered across the perimeter, and it had all happened in a matter of hours. In a single night, 42 Marines were killed across those two positions. There were no large headlines for it. This was just another fight, in another place, during a war filled with them. But for the men who were there, and for the families who would hear about it later, it wasn't just another night. Today, that ground looks different. The fire bases are gone, and the fighting is long over. And unless you know what happened there, you'd never think twice about it. But it happened, and 42 men never left that place. Their names can be found on panel 31W at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. Remembered by the people who knew them, and by the ones who make the effort to learn about what happened in places like that. Let us choose never to forget these brave American men.